So here we have Jeremiah, this young man, during the reign of this good king, this righteous king who will go on to renew the covenant and restore the temple and restore the law and do all these amazing godly things. And here's Jeremiah giving the task to declare destruction and judgment. Something that seemed totally out of character with what was happening in that culture at that moment. And God, He doesn't just give them a to-do list. He gives them a to-be list. He says, I'm going to make you an iron pillar. I'm going to make you a fortified city. I'm going to give you the strength you need during what's ahead. Because even though to everyone else it looked like times were good and that they had a godly king, they weren't going to stay good. Josiah was eventually going to die, and his sons who took over were very evil, and judgment was going to come. Now, here's what I want you to understand, is God took Jeremiah on a journey. He declared to him, you're going to be strong, you're going to be a fortified wall, but there's this journey that happens throughout Jeremiah, and there's this story in chapter 12 that I want to focus on because I've always loved this story, and I've studied it and I've thought about it because God says some pretty amazing things to Jeremiah. Now, just to give you a backdrop, he had been declaring judgment some, but also during this time Josiah is making reforms and doing good things. And so Josiah is causing trouble in the sense that there are still people that are wanting to worship idols. There are still priests that are wanting to serve in their own, ways of worship and not according to God's word. And so Josiah is making all these reforms and stirring up all these people who don't want to follow along. And Jeremiah is, declaring righteousness and declaring, God's going to punish us and judge us for these because that's part of the covenant, right? And so during this time, you have these people. The king may have been good, but the people were still, many of them wanting to worship idols. And that's why Josiah had to pronounce edicts to go and tear down all the idols, is because the people weren't doing them. And so during this time, Jeremiah is given this task, and God is telling him, I'm going to make you strong to do it. But then here in chapter 11 and chapter 12, he comes up against his first kind of people fighting against him. And what it is that the people of his own hometown, which was a city of priests, and he was part of a priestly family, were wanting to kill him. Probably because of his support of Josiah making all the reforms that he was doing. And so this is what happens. God tells Jeremiah in chapter 11 that people are out to kill him. And this is Jeremiah's complaint about that. This is his response to people wanting to kill him in chapter 12. You are always righteous, Lord, when I bring a case before you. Yet I will speak to you about your justice. Why does the way of the wicked prosper? Why do all the faithless live at ease? You have planted them, and they have taken root. They grow and bear fruit. You are always on their lips, but far from their hearts. Yet you know me, Lord. You see me and test my thoughts about you. Drag them off like sheep to be butchered. Set them apart for the day of slaughter. How long will the land lie parched and the grass in every field be withered? Because those who live in it are wicked. The animals and the birds have perished. Moreover, the people are saying, he will not see what happens to us. And so here's Jeremiah, and he's dealing with a personal situation. He's going through some personal stuff. His family is rejecting him, right? His friends, the people he grew up with, is rejecting him. And not only is he overwhelmed with the fact that he's facing personal obstacles, personal opposition, but he's looking around him at the world around him, and he's making complaint about the world around him. Now, I find myself in that place sometimes too, when I start to get overwhelmed with the condition of the world. When I start looking at what's happening in the news and with the hatred between, races and this whole political thing, there's lots of things that can overwhelm us about the world that we're in, right? And so that's where Jeremiah is at. He's at this place where personally he's been attacked, personally he's been rejected, but he's also overwhelmed with the condition of his world. And you know what? God has such comforting things to say to him, doesn't he? God's such a comforter. He's such a kind father who comforts and lifts up, and no, God does it. God doesn't have comforting things to say to him. This is what God says to him. And these are the verses that I have, I thought about, I've meditated on, I've wondered about for a long time. This is God's answer to Jeremiah. If you have raced with men on foot and they have worn you out, how can you compete with horses? If you stumble in safe country, how will you manage in the thickets by the Jordan? Your relatives, members of your own family, even they have betrayed you. They have raised a loud cry against you. Do not trust them, though they speak well of you. And then God goes on to talk about his own grief and his feelings about what's going on, right? Here's what I want you to see. Number one, even though there are times in our life, obviously, where God is our comforter, in this instance, God isn't trying to comfort Jeremiah. He's basically saying, you know what? I expect you to be more than just a mere man here. I expect you to run with the horses. I expect you to do the impossible. Yeah, I know everyone's against you. It's only going to get worse. And it is. For Jeremiah, it is. But I told you, you are a strong tower. You are a fortified city. You are an iron pillar. There was an expectation, not that Jeremiah was going to rise above the circumstances, but that he was going to rise to who God has created him to be. He was going to rise to the occasion and compete with horses, right? This isn't rising above in the sense that he can ignore what's going on. This isn't rising above in the sense that nothing affects him. Like sometimes I think as human beings and even as Christians, our subconscious goal is transcendence, and that nothing on earth will affect us anymore. After all, we are citizens of heaven and none of this affects me. Well, that's just stupid. You can't live in this world and care about this world and care about people and not be impacted and not want to do something about it. There's a reason why we feel overwhelmed, right? God's answer isn't that we can ignore everything that's going on around us. It's that we become who he has created us to be, more than just mere mortals, more than just racing with men and trying to keep up, but that we are able to rise to who he has created us to be and do the impossible and compete with the horses, and to believe that we carry something that makes the impossible possible. To believe that greater is he who is in us than what's going on around us. That we carry the answer for circumstances. This is the second thing that God does with Jeremiah, is he turns his perspective from outward and what's happening out there to what he is called to be. He doesn't say, oh, you're right, everybody's really crappy. He says, no, you are called to do more. You are called to rise to the occasion. He turns his perspective away. Honestly, when you're feeling overwhelmed by something, it's because we're not looking at it the right way. We're not looking at it through the lens of a powerful and loving God. You are looking at it through our own humanity and what we can do about it, which is usually nothing. So that's the second thing God does. So first of all, he doesn't offer comfort. He offers the encouragement. He offers to kind of, put on your big girl pants, put on, And then secondly, he turns his gaze away from just the circumstances, because for Jeremiah, things are going to get worse. And he has got to find a way to be who God has created him to be, regardless of the circumstances. So, and then the final thing I want to point out is that we tend to think of obstacles as always from the enemy and something bad, and God would never put obstacles in front of us, or trials or tests. And I just think that's wrong too. I think that the reason why God put the tree in the garden wasn't just to give us free will, it was to give us something to overcome, because we were born to be overcomers. But you can't have a theology of overcoming without obstacles to overcome. You can't have a theology of victory without a theology of suffering. Like, you can't just ignore the fact that there's suffering in the world and there's suffering in this life and that there are obstacles to overcome on the way to these amazing promises. You know, wouldn't it be great if we could just go from where we're at now to the amazing promises that we have all idealized in our minds? You know, wouldn't it be great if I could just go from where I am right now to being Joan of Arc and all the stuff that Pat said about me? Well, the deal is that it never gets easy. Life does not get easy. Life can be full of joy. Life can be full of power, and it can be full of life. And, well, life should be full of life, but life can be good, but it's not ever going to be easy. Not even when you get into your promised land.